Welcome back, everybody, to Cellar Chats here at the Second Glass. My name's Chris, and we're talking amazing females in wine because it is International Women's History Month, and these ladies are either making history today, have already made history, or a bit of both. So this week we're traveling to California. Actually, I shouldn't say California. The West Coast. It's mostly California, but we're going to the West Coast, and we're going to start out with pretty much a banger of a wine and of a human being with the La Serena. This is their Moscato Azul. Don't be confused. It is dry. It is not sweet. From Heidi Barrett, who is just an absolute legend. And then we're going to pop over to Jamie Motley, brand new to the state, really amazing up-and-coming winemaker that we're all very excited about with her Mondus Rose. And then finishing off with an Oregon legend, Patricia Green, one of the absolute greats who we sadly lost a couple years ago, but more on that in a little bit. So, West Coast, Heidi Barrett, and we're drinking Moscato. I mean, I don't know how many times that you'll see Moscato on one of these flights, maybe only this one time. But, as I said before, the wine, it's always about the wines. They're delicious. We want to know that. But this month, it's all about championing amazing females working in the wine industry, doing great stuff, and making history every day. So Heidi Barrett is, I would say, arguably one of the top 5 most important females in California as far as, like, historically speaking. Like, people who really paved the path for, producers like Jamie Motley, and even to an extent like Patricia Green. Even though she was in Oregon, it's not that far away. The wine industry is a small industry, and everybody kind of knows each other and is familiar with each other. So, the things that people like Heidi Barrett put in place and sort of like broke down doors for made it much easier for people who came after her. And I think anybody who works in wine, especially females who work in wine, who work out on the West Coast, have people like Heidi to thank. Her career is ridiculously prestigious. She's worked all over California. She worked in Australia in her early days. She got, degrees from UC Davis in the 80s. She worked at Bueller. I think her big break really came when she was hired on as the winemaker at Dalabal, a very prestigious, very famous old school Napa producer. And she worked there until like about the mid 90s. But I'd say the thing that most people associate her with is her being the founding winemaker and founding of Screaming Eagle, which really is probably one of the most expensive bottles of wine you can get from California. It's the hardest to find, and continues to get huge accolades. She has been the winemaker there, I think, since its inception, if I remember correctly, and she basically continues to do that. And then she has several other projects. Basically, everything this woman touches turns out to gold, and it's incredible. And I think she's a great human being and an incredible winemaker. So this is her La Serena label, which is just a really fun label. A little bit different than some of our other stuff where she gets to have a little fun, play with some different varieties. Hence, we're drinking Moscato. So the grape variety is Muscat Canelli. So classically, Moscato is made usually sweet, typically a little spritzy. But what she does here is, tones down that like sweetness. She lets it, basically it ferments all the way to dryness. She wants it to go all the way. And what I mean by dryness is the lack of sugar or very low sugar content. So you get all of those beautiful aromas that you find in Moscato. And if you're turning your nose up and you've not really had Moscato, search out a good Moscato d'Asti. It's totally worth it. They are delicious. Yes, there is sweetness, but it's done when done well, the wines are so good, especially for like warm summer afternoons. You're eating like maybe some fresh fruit or maybe having some dessert. Like, very few things pair as well as that. So I'm sure I'll get some crap for that, but that's the truth. On the nose, really floral, tons of tropical fruit, clean and fresh. I mean, you get a sense of like sweetness, but it's kind of like sweet, like lychee fruits, and again, a little bit of that like white peach, more of like stone fruit characters, and like a honeysuckle floral character. And I think whenever anybody smells florals, they think something's going to be sweet. because it does have a sweet sense to it and it gives you the perception of sweetness. This wine is not that. So let's throw it over the tongue and talk about it. Yeah, wow. I mean, that is pretty bone dry. I've talked about this before, but a great way to judge, when we're talking about Riesling, judge if it's going to be a drier Riesling or a sweeter Riesling is looking at the alcohol. So, for instance, the La Serena, this is 13.1. That's dry. Anything above 11 and a half is going to be pretty darn dry. Anything below 11% alcohol is probably going to have a little residual sweetness. Now, that is not an exact science, but it's pretty close. It's a great way to judge. I will say this packaging is excellent. Now, we're at second glass. Labeling and packaging doesn't always make a huge difference because it's not like you're buying by the bottle, you're buying off of a list. But there's something to be said about this really beautiful, like azul blue and gorgeous label. So that wine is dynamite. Very, very tasty. I've actually never had this wine from her. I've not had a lot of Heidi Barrett wines. They're typically extremely expensive, but this one is quite affordable and really tasty. And as we get closer and closer to spring, it certainly feels like spring today. This wine makes more and more sense. So come taste this wine just to have your mind blown that you're drinking the same variety found in Moscato d'Asti or those like inexpensive Moscatos you saw at the grocery store that you had at a party once, and you're just like, this is going to give me the worst headache ever, but there's nothing else to drink. You just put it on ice and treat it like a cocktail. This is not that, and it's totally worth drinking. Again, that is Heidi Barrett's La Serena. Just get it as close as possible. That works. Her Moscato Azul, so dry Muscat Cannelli. All right, now we're jumping over to a very young, up-and-coming, really amazing producer, Jamie Motley. This is her Mondus Rose. Now, for those of you who are paying attention, we are in 2022. That is a 2020 bottling of rosé, and this is actually the current release from her. When I was reading a little bit about it to kind of study up, in all fairness, these wines landed in the state last week, so these are brand new to the market, literally. They were never available before. Anyways, back to what I was talking about, a little off the topic. When she went to bottle the wine, it just wasn't quite ready, so she held it back for an extra year. So the 2020 is actually the current release, and I can't wait to get into it because I've not tasted it. I just know that Jamie Motley is amazing. So, again, young producer. She spent some time, I think she spent some time in the Southern Hemisphere. She came from restaurants. She worked at the very famous RN74 in San Francisco under Raj Parr. Again, another very famous sommelier winemaker. He does Sandy and Domaine de la Côte and Evening Land in Oregon. And then she made her way to the very the very well-loved Pax Wine Cellars, where she was an intern, assistant winemaker, and I've said this before, and I can't say it enough, the winemakers that come out from underneath of working with Pax and in that facility are second to none. They're some of the best in California, particularly of the new wave, new generation. She still makes her wines at Pax Wine Cellars. But then more recently, and I think this is really amazing, and this kind of gives you an idea of how incredible Jamie Motley is and how talented she is and the things she's going to do in the future. She was just recently, I want to say either late last year or early last year, she was named the new head winemaker of Stony Hill. Now, that is not a name a lot of you maybe are familiar with, but Stony Hill is one of the most historic producers in Napa Valley. They've been around for a long time. It's one of the few producers that you can find some really old bottlings of from Napa, really classic wines. It had recently been sold to a new investor who wanted to bring it back to its former glory, and that investor tapped Jamie Motley to be the head winemaker, which is incredible. It's showcasing how far we've come, and again, how talented this young female really is in the world of wine, that a super prestigious winery that has loads of history, lots on their shoulders to make sure they live up to it. They came to Jamie to say, hey, we want you to make these wines because we believe what you are doing is incredible, and you're gonna, really come to the, what's that phrase? Come to the plate? Is that it? Come to the bat? Whatever. I'm terrible with those things. Let's talk about this wine, Mondus. Bet you never tasted that. Historically from Savoie. It's a little bit like, maybe, what is the word I'm looking for? It's a little bit like Syrah, Gamay, Pinot Noir. It's kind of smoky. It's a little savory. It's got like lighter, fresher fruits, but here done as a rosé. This is from the Rourke Heritage Vineyard up in the Sierra Foothills. On the nose, it's a little subdued, but there's some really beautiful red fruit. I think it's a little cold. I like my rosés a little warmer than like ice cold, which is what this is. Oh, wow. Super clean, really vibrant, loads of texture. That is, and something I also point out, like, that is a little bit like watermelon rind, watermelon colored. It's not your traditional super light kind of salmon color. There's a little more depth to it, but that couldn't be more fresh, easy drinking, and just all the things you want from rosé than anything else. Like, that is a rosé for literally for the drink rosé all day thing. Yeah, that's what this wine is all about. I am so excited to have these wines. I personally get to sell these wines through the company I work for, Kellogg Selections. And so that always makes me happy to get to taste things. It's the first time I've tasted it. We don't get a lot. Again, this is the first drop, but I've been watching Jamie for a while. I've been really interested, and I always thought to myself, man, I wish these wines would come to the market, and now they're here, and I'm very stoked on it. And this wine is really tasty. Yeah, you guys need to come out just to have the first two. Patricia Green is always good, but these first two are really spectacular. Oh my goodness, yes, Jamie, killer rosé. And for anybody who, for any reason, wants to look this up, Jamie is spelled with two E's. That's Jaimee. That is a rather uncommon way of spelling Jamie. So when you look it up, that is how it's spelled. All right, so getting into the Crescendo, Patricia Green Cellars. Not much has to be said here. Patricia Green, although not necessarily one of the most historic or oldest wineries in Oregon, I think what she really brought to the Oregon wine scene and how quickly she became a bit of a dominating figure without really trying to be says a lot about Patricia Green. Like I said, she passed away just a few years ago. I want to say maybe 2000. I'm going to pull it up because I want to be accurate. 2017. So it's been longer than I thought. Feels like yesterday. I think that's what people say when they get old. It must mean that I'm old. But Patricia Green, or Patty Green, as most people refer to her, pretty spectacular producer, and she really kind of came along in Oregon as things were starting to heat up as far as like the focus and people paying attention to Oregon. She founded the winery, purchased the estate vineyards in 2000, which was kind of a pinnacle time. I think between like 2001 to like 2009 is really when Oregon hit its stride. The wines had been made there before. They'd been, people had heard of them. I think, even some, because there's a huge influx of French producers that made their way out there. I think a lot of those guys came around the 2000s, maybe a little bit before, but I'm getting off task. She came at a pinnacle time and really just like hit the ground running, and just was making incredible wines from the get-go, and really became known for that. She became, known for her ageability. I've personally had the pleasure of having some of her single vineyards going back like 10 or so years. They're probably 15 to 16 years old now, but this was about 5 or 6 years ago that I had those, and the wines were just spectacular. They had held up much better than I had expected. Really beautiful, savory characteristics, but still lots of fruit. And that's not an easy task to do. So my hat's off to her. She was a pioneering female in Oregon. The amount of females women making wines in Oregon, I'm sure is much more than I know. But I don't know of a ton that date back that far, if that makes sense. Oregon is a little bit behind the curve as far as like California or even really Washington, I think. Just because the wine industry is much younger and it's, not as well explored. Maybe that's the term I'm looking for. This wine smells incredible, by the way. It's been a while since I've had Patricia Green, probably 5 or 6 years, give or take. Probably the last time I had it was probably that aged bottle. But needless to say, back to what I wanted to talk about, which is Patricia Green is an icon of Oregon winemaking. She's very dearly missed to this day and will continue to be missed. She created a huge impact without really like standing out. Some producers come in and they make themselves very known and everybody gets to know their name. I think what was really wonderful about what Patty did is that she came in, she made incredible wines. People knew about her, but she kind of flew under the radar. Like everyone knew she was great. They knew the wines were amazing, but she wasn't like bombastic about it. She just went about her day, just focusing on making great wines, having a beautiful winery and vineyards where sustainability was top notch, and just an amazing human being. So cheers to her. The winery continues to, shell out incredible wines. I honestly don't know who's taken over, but that's not what's important. What's important is incredible women who have made history and continue to make history to this day. So cheers to that. And this wine is exceptional. It's like kind of black cherry, a little smoke, a little savory, definitely some minerality there. And although, just a random fact, although this is called the reserve bottling, I do think it's the entry-level bottling. There is no dictation for what you can call a reserve wine in the US. So I don't know why they put that on there. I'm sure there's a good story behind it. I don't know the story. I can tell you the wine is very tasty. Light, elegant. Again, more of that savory kind of black cherry character and very mineral, like slate clean freshness on the palate. So good. I mean, this is again, the ladies are crushing it. Women in wine, I personally always like to point out when it's a female winemaker, but for me, I think the most important thing is that they're amazing winemakers that happen to be female. And I think that's amazing. It is. It's truly awesome. So, the lineup, let's do a rundown. Heidi Barrett, true legend of California, the La Serena, Moscato Azul. Jamie Motley, future legend, amazing up-and-coming producer, doing her Mondus Rose. And the late, great Patricia Green, Oregon Pinot Noir. Thank you guys for tuning in. Next week, we've got some more fun, incredible women making great wines, and we'll learn about their stories.